Hello, I'm Kimberly Donder, Digital Content Manager, and welcome to In Conversation With, the podcast series that delves into the world of financial services and brings you face to face with some of the most notable figures in the industry. Listen as we discuss topics that are currently facing the industry and hear from visionary CEOs to disruptive innovators as we bring you a diverse array of voices and perspectives. We'll explore the challenges they faced, the lessons they've learned, and the insights they have to share about the ever-evolving landscape of financial services.
Hello, I'm Lois Vallely, Chief Reporter for Money Marketing, and joining me on this episode of the podcast, we have Scott Phillips, who is founder of the Pension Lab. Scott, hi, thank you so much for joining me today. It's great to have you on.
Hi, Lois. No, thank you very much for having me on.
So perhaps you could start off by just introducing yourself, saying a bit about yourself, how you got into financial services, and then why you launched Pension Lab.
Sure. So my name's Scott Phillips, CEO of the Pension Lab, as you mentioned. I am a lifelong financial services, a career-long financial services individual. I started out actually leaving school. Glasgow's quite a large financial services centre, and so started working in Abbey National actually at the time, and realised that financial services could be a really interesting career path into the financial advice space. So started very young doing the FPC exams it was at the time, and managed to complete those, and then did the AFPC exams, and ultimately ended up becoming a private banker in London in my early 30s, and that was with Barclays. And from there, I really enjoyed that role because the exposure that you get, but also quite a creative person and wasn't necessarily getting perhaps the creative outlet in that role that I was desiring. And you could see these challenges as your eyes are opened to things that are going on in the industry, the advice gap and some of the other challenges. I really wanted to try and do something to present solutions in those spaces. And ultimately, we sort of saw that the pension dashboard was coming and auto-enrollment had happened. So everybody in the UK that was working, above a certain income would have a pension. Pension dashboard was coming, so it seemed like a really good area to focus energy. And so that's ultimately what we did. We set out to play into the theme of the pension dashboard, and this is a few years ago now, to take advantage of the opportunities that's presented. And obviously that's led us down various different paths.
Great. So the first thing I did want to talk about, because I know you have a lot of opinions on it and you're doing a lot of work on it, was letters of authority, which I just wrote a big feature on. I don't know if any of our listeners have read that, which I quote you in, Scott.
Good feature.
So just, widely, what's going on there? Why is it such a big issue? What's the state of it? What needs to be done? I mean, I kind of know, but if we could just have a bit of a chat around that.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's, I think, a bit of a backstory to why we're interested in letters of authority, or why it's relevant to us, is that we set out to build dashboards with the technology that was available today, so we could launch and perfect the products that pension dashboards could support. And so that was including some electronic connections. And at the start, LOA was really just a backfill for us, so that we could gather information for members who couldn't connect pensions. But as we got more into the pension transfer process and deeper down that process, we understood actually that LOA is really an absolutely key component of that. Many members who come into these processes don't know their policy number, don't know policy features. So it's really the only way today that you can get accurate policy information. So doing LOAs at scale is a key component of what we do, which is why it's close to our hearts. But being a technology firm as well, we've automated the process that is LOA today as best as we can. But we see this as a process that, really kind of began before computers were even common in the workplace, and it's still very much the same today. It might be over email, but not an awful lot's changed. And the average time for an LOA response is a couple of weeks. Sometimes it's 6, even 12 weeks, and the effect that has on the consumer's experience is dramatic. And you just, as a consumer, don't expect today that you're going to go into a process where it's going to take that length of time. You're used to going into banking apps and pressing buttons and transactions happen. And there's a technology solution to this. There's actually really interestingly, there's regulations, there's laws, there's standards that actually, through the LOA life cycle, if you want to call it that, of each LOA, actually should be addressing these points. But I think it's become just a kind of something that people accept. And there's never really been a collective approach to trying to solve the problem. And you know about our LOA campaign. So what we're trying to do, it's an industry campaign, trying to bring the industry together to discuss the solution to this problem. And it's not like we have to completely paint new ideas. There are solutions there, laws around signatures, GDPR, standards, which should be able to solve this. So that's why we want to try and just raise the profile of the issue. And we appreciate you obviously writing about it as well, because it is an issue today that really needs to be resolved.
Yeah, well, it seems like an issue that affects so many people, anyone who wants to transfer a pension, for example. And it's definitely a massive thing for advisors. It's one of the key pain points, as I've been told by many advisors, and it's been in many reports. So yeah, I think it's a really important topic, and I look forward to the outcome of the campaign. But yeah, just from my own, I've had my own personal experience of this as well, which I wrote about in the feature, which was so obviously we're going to, I think, come on to pension dashboard in a minute, but it obviously hasn't come out yet. So a couple of years ago, I wanted to gather all my pensions together. So I used Pension Consolidator. This was before I joined money marketing. I didn't know much about anything. It's worked out well, but many advisors have rolled their eyes at me when I've told them I went Pension B for some reason. But when I had 4 pensions, personal pensions that I transferred in. The first 3 were fine, electronic signatures accepted. The 4th one, which I can say, Virgin Money, was just horrendous. It was one of the worst experiences ever. I got stack of paperwork that was nearly as tall as me. No, exaggeration, but very tall. They wanted wet signatures on many things. I had to go and photocopy my driver's license, send it to them, send them a paper copy of a letter from a utility provider, which I don't get paper copies of letters of utility providers. So that was a nightmare. So yes, I definitely feel the pain. And that was just one transaction. So I imagine for advisors who are doing this for clients regularly, it's an absolute nightmare.
Yeah, and as far as our campaign goes, we're building up a supporter base of like-minded companies in the industry. Pension B is one of them, who's joined as a supporter. Also, EV technology provider to the advice space, and also Penny, another non-advised consolidator. But advisors do really feel this, because they are the ones that. So this is kind of an apology from the industry, that there's a challenge here, but it's the advisor that's in front of the client saying, I'm sorry this is taking so long, it's because of this. So they're the one that often it reflects upon, and it's not really their fault. So this is why, as an industry, we really need to get together. So we need the weight of the advice community, other non-advised type processes, and get providers in the conversation as well, because I think it's a pain for them also. They have to reply to these, so there's a cost right through the chain, which is significant. And as part of our campaign, what we're trying to do, or what the ask is, it's the Log LOA campaign, and the ask is that for advisors and companies who complete LOAs to go to pensionlab.co.uk/log LOA and log their LOA numbers. It only takes a couple of minutes, but there's been a lot of qualitative discussion about LOAs and how much of a pain they are and how much of a challenge they are, but no one's really tried to quantify the problem. And we are going to gather these numbers and then present back to the industry and the regulator a white paper outlining what we think the size of the problem is. And the early estimations that we've come up with are literally staggering, of the numbers of these that are going around. And many of them come in the post, up to a quarter come in the post, to the impact on the environment, as well as so there's a whole set of challenges with LOA. And I guess each one needs to be addressed individually. There's no one solution. It's not actually one problem. You've got the challenge with signatures and authentication. You've got the challenge with sending them and knowing if they're there. You've got the challenge with them coming back and needing to redigitize information that was already in a system that it got printed off of and posted to you from. And so, there are solutions, and it's looking back to these kind of laws, regulations, and standards that already are there, that we can leverage to try and make some change here. Consumer duty is an example. So yeah, hopefully we can get a body of support behind making some change. Get some round tables together and actually start to try and drive some improvements.
Yeah, definitely. I'm surprised that the COVID pandemic didn't do more to sort of help with this, because I know it digitalized quite a few processes, but we seem to be going back the other way again.
Yeah, there seem to be some providers who accepted digital signatures through the COVID crisis, but then went back to where they were before afterwards. And it's really interesting because this is one of the laws. So the Electronic Communications Act 2000, electronic signatures are legally binding. The Law Society kind of rubber stamped this in 2019. Qualified and advanced electronic signatures are legally binding, so should be being accepted. So you should be able to send a request to a provider with an electronic signature, and legally they should be responding. But that's not the case. And the same with GDPR. So you can request information in a machine-readable, commonly used format, and that's not happening. So there are these laws and regulations in place that we should be able to hopefully leverage to drive some change.
And you mentioned consumer duty already. Do you think that's, I know it's only been in place since July last year, but is that having an effect yet? Will it have an effect on this issue in the future?
It's talked about an awful lot, and what I'm actually working through trying to understand is how to leverage it. How do we leverage it? There's lots of conversation, and it can be brought up in conversation about, these are sludge practices, so it's square in the middle of consumer duty. But how do we use the force of consumer duty? And I've understood that there are some, whistleblowing opportunities for particular providers if they're clearly just deliberately holding up, information. But how those conduits are used, and again, there has to be a kind of, a consistent approach to doing that. So it's just one company doing it probably won't help. But if we have a campaign that has a body of support that can start to, pull these levers to try and make change. So there's kind of both ends. There's the providers who understand this is a problem. It's a problem for them. It's time consuming for them that want to adapt and make change, and they are there. So that's pulling from one end, and then there's kind of pushing the others in through the regulation, and the ones that are, and if they are there deliberately holding up assets, so there's those kind of two different approaches. But I think any solution does have to be inclusive. This is not going to be a government mandated thing like the pension dashboard or open finance if and when it comes further down the line. This is something that has to work because everyone wants it to work, and ultimately it should do, because if we get a solution, it's better for the provider, better for the advisor, and ultimately better for the consumer, who just wouldn't expect that they'd be stepping into a process like what they're experiencing.
Definitely. And your point about earlier about it sort of when they're advised, it reflecting badly on the advisors, I think is an important one. And I know some advisors who've lost clients just because the process took so long, and it seemed like it was their fault, but it really wasn't. It was held up by providers. So yeah, definitely an important ongoing thing. You've mentioned pension dashboard a few times. I did want to chat a bit about that and what's going on there. And also it kind of ties into, I suppose, this small pots thing that the government's looking at, which I think some people have called Pot for Life. I don't know if that's the official name still, but is that a bit of a distraction from pension dashboard? Does it fit in with what the government's trying to do with pension dashboard? What are your thoughts on all that?
Yeah, I think essentially it still fits in, because if Pots for Life if it starts at a certain point, and there'll be lots of consumers with multiple pensions in the background that they need to see and consider what they're going to do with. So I think it still makes sense. And with the pension dashboard, it has been delayed, and it's a great development for the industry when it comes, and we've obviously been playing into that theme for a long time, and it's helped us to establish ourselves in that space. But ultimately, it's really interesting when we talk about LOAs in the pension dashboard. So there's this kind of school of thought, potentially the dashboard will help with things like letters of authority, but actually it's more than likely to make it worse. And there's not going to be significant amounts of information in the pension dashboard, but balance policy number. You're not going to be able to make transactions within the dashboard environment because it's regulated out, because there's not enough information in there to make decisions. So the natural extension is that you'll come out of the dashboard environment, enrich the information before you can make decisions. And the only way today you can really do that is through letters of authority. And one provider's done an assessment and believes that letters of authority can multiply by 8 after the pension dashboard. So it's not even that this is a problem that's kind of maybe going to go away. It actually could get a lot worse if we don't do something about it. So yeah, this is why we're trying to really push the agenda today before it's too late and pension dashboards here, and we've just multiplied the problem.
Yeah, definitely. I did want to talk a bit about how technology, I know you've already touched on technology obviously, but how technology can be used or leveraged to help with this issue. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so there are standards in place, and actually there's different and you've got the LOA life cycle, different stages of an LOA from sending to receiving, and then there's the later pension transfer. So actually right through that process, there's technological advancements and technological change. And if we put our rose-tinted glasses on and look 10 years down the line, you've got a dashboard which helps you find all your pensions, and then Open Finance allows you to gather information, and then you can access third-party services to make decisions, and it's all done, in the next couple of days, potentially through Swift banking messaging. That's where we're trying to get to, but there's obviously a lot of different steps along the way. We don't know when Open Finance will come. Pension dashboard's still not guaranteed to start in 2026. So what we've done as a business is effectively try to automate as much as we can and make the process as slick as possible today. But there will be technologies that come along. There's some advances in the pension transfer market, which are more secure, quicker, and will reduce the cost of transfers, which is important for your small pots piece. And then in terms of LOAs, there are standards in place already. They just haven't really been adopted. So if providers were to adopt these standards and open up technical connections, then third parties could connect to submit LOAs and potentially even receive them back. And that would create innovation, competition, all the other good stuff that helps industries to move forward. And it would be in the provider's interests as well, because if those requests are coming in an automated fashion, then the actual authentication process could be much quicker, and you're standardizing what's coming in, so you're not going to have lots of different kind of versions of forms coming in that you have to work through. So I think there's a solution here. I can see a solution that can work for everyone, but it's just getting that body of support behind pushing for it. And I don't think it's not a complete technology solution. It may be that it solves 80%, but if we can solve 80% of the problem, that's still a big step forward from where we are today.
Yeah, definitely. And especially if it's looking like it might get worse before it gets better as well. Why do you think it is that some providers haven't adopted these standards? And is it even allowed? They're supposed to adopt standards, presumably.
Yeah, I think the standards are optional. And what's happened is some providers have been very good at optimizing their letter of authority processes, and they have actually invested in them. Like L&G, we're getting same-day responses in many cases. So some providers really have invested in that, and others as well. Aegon have invested in their processes, and but they've all done different things, and so the standardization piece would make it easier, I think, for everybody. And I think the reason standards weren't adopted was because there's kind of this view that, well, maybe the industry won't adopt them or they won't be used. So this again is why it's so important to get this body of support, this unified voice saying, if you build these standards, we will plug in and we will connect to them. So I think that, and if you can imagine in these businesses, and I believe there possibly are some businesses that literally are sitting there saying, right, we don't want to lose money, so we're going to make this difficult. But I don't believe that's commonplace. I think it's just that the areas of businesses that are getting investment aren't particularly those areas. So they're maybe underinvested in the processes in some cases. And I don't believe it's a sinister approach from many providers around it. And we want this initiative to be inclusive of providers. The only way we can sort this is if everyone gets together and we can find solutions that work for everybody. So that's the direction we're trying to push it in.
Yeah, definitely. And if there are any providers out there that are using deliberately sluggish practices to keep clients, that's really, I would suggest, a very bad strategy, because people probably aren't going to want to do business with them again if that's the case.
Yeah, it's not a good long-term strategy, I don't think.
No, definitely not. Very short-termist. If we could have a bit of a discussion around how this fits into the advice gap and the sort of, the FCA's got this whole advice guidance review that it's doing. Just how does that sort of fit in with what we've been talking about?
So what we've done is we've tried to create a process. Our key client base is auto-enrollment master trusts. And so there's an advice gap. I think that's fairly clear. The bar for which you need to have in terms of wealth is getting higher and higher. And so there's different approaches to solving the advice gap. And there's schools of thought that kind of digitizing and making advice cheaper is kind of the only solution. And I don't believe that's the case. I believe that absolutely there's a place for that, but there's a place for lots of different types of solutions. You know, in the Master Trust use case, the average transfer value can be around 7,000. So advice just maybe isn't practical. The person might have already decided that they want to do it themselves, but then it's about filling this advice gap with solutions, non-advised solutions that actually protect the member on the way through. So rather than saying this is something that you should do, it's about making sure that they don't do something that they shouldn't. So this is where LOA is also really important, because it can identify policy features that the member might not want to lose as part of the process. So I guess the key point is that there's got to be room for different types of solutions for different use cases, and even different individuals within the same use case, because they may want different services. Not everybody wants advice, and I don't think consumers necessarily understand what advice means as a structure. It's a regulatory structure to some extent. So I think the new rules from the FCA are welcome, and that will hopefully provide some room for more advancements and innovations in different spaces that will support other solutions in the advice gap.
Definitely. I think it is the advice gap as a general term is an interesting one, because there's so many, as you mentioned, so many different types of clients who might fall into different types of advice gaps. So there's the ones who have loads of money but aren't getting advice because they don't know they should, or they don't know they need it. There's the ones who maybe don't have enough money for traditional full fat financial advice, and then there's the ones who just don't seek advice because they view it as expensive. So it's a whole big issue, I think, and definitely hopefully one that the advice guidance boundary review helps with a bit.
Yeah, and also, they just want to make decisions that be supported to make a decision by themselves in the right way and presented with information. So I think there's definitely room for lots of different solutions, and this just provides more opportunity to do that.
Yeah, definitely. That's great. I think we are probably coming to the end, but before I let you go, I did just want to ask you one more thing, which I ask all of my guests, and that is, what one piece of advice would you give to someone looking to embark on a career in financial services from your own experience?
Yeah, and I think the way my career went is an example. Financial services touches really everybody's lives one way or another, so it can take you in lots of different ways. I ended up in a banking type career, and then wanted to do something a bit more creative, and was able to do that. So I think the key point is understanding the industry. So I did my time, if you like, understanding the industry, and then was able to take that career in the way that I wanted. So that's what I would recommend. But it gives you lots of opportunity to go in whatever direction you would like with your career.
Yeah, definitely. It's a big sector, much bigger than I realised before I started writing about it. So lots of opportunities. Perfect. Well, thank you so much for joining me, Scott. It's been really great to chat to you. I've really enjoyed it.
Thank you very much. Likewise. Thanks for having me on.
Thank you for listening to In Conversation With. We do hope that you enjoyed it. Please do keep up to date with all our new releases via Podbean, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and everywhere else you get your podcasts from. You can also keep up to date with all our new content published on the Money Marketing website, as well as our print edition Money Marketing magazine, so make sure to subscribe. Follow us on Twitter, LinkedIn, Facebook, and Instagram. See you next time.